Yep. All right. It is 9 o'clock. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and then I am going to hand it off to Lucas Mitchell, who is certified arborist with the City of Rancho Cucamonga. All right. So I will pass it to you, Lucas.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucas Mitchell, your host and co-host today. I'm the supervisor for the urban forestry program here for the City of Rancho Cucamonga, and we have this California team training brought to you by Circle 4. There's a lot of slides in here. Some of them we're going to touch on more than others. A lot of them we're just going to skim through because there's just too much information that we need to go through. So please bear with me. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up to questions and answers. And then at the same time, we have Ron Servin on, and Ron is going to do a virtual walkthrough. We were going to do this, as many of you know, we were going to do this presentation live, but due to concerns with the pandemic and whatnot, decided at the last minute to go virtual. So I apologize for that. I just wanted to also touch on the fact that a big reason for this training is as part of the Circle 4 program and grant, we need to do some sort of an educational component, and that's what this is about. So please bear with me as I try to get through this as painlessly as possible for me because I'm nervous about it. I'm not big on virtual presentations, and try and enjoy yourself. Make some notes for any questions you may have at the end. All right then. Okay, so as mentioned, and this training is in collaboration with Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, along with a number of other partners. And the goal of this is to reduce emissions in sub-communities. As you will learn in this little presentation, there's a lot of communities involved with this big grant. And in short, it's an attempt to plant 2,000 plus trees in the state of California all on one day, which will be March 12th. Everyone that's on here and all the participants that will be all have a reason for being part of it. And there's just a little touching on what is your reason why. I know that I have a lot of reasons why I'm not only here, but in this industry. And just a couple of them for me is wanting to beautify my city. I care a lot about environmental health. And I love being an active part of my community, whether it's here from this standpoint or just being a resident of this city. Circle 4, amplifying the urban forest. This is a statewide project to plant trees and educate communities about urban forestry. There are many unique partners involved in this program. And I've been involved in a lot of programs with our nonprofit Sustainable Claremont. We've done a lot of really cool things, but I've never been part of something this big, and it's pretty exciting. We will also be launching an educational app, and I don't know if I mentioned this. This is being recorded and available to review it further at a further time. It will introduce and expose youth to urban forestry. That's a big thing for us. And we obviously City of Rancho, Tree City USA, 32 past years, working on year 33. We try to do a big emphasis on educating young adults to children about the importance of urban forestry and trees and their role in our environment here. So it's exciting. These are some of our partners. A cool one is, well, they're all pretty awesome. All of these you can look up and see what their roles are, and we're going to touch on some of them as we go along. We do have a YouTube video coming up in this, put on by my buddy John Mahoney, and explaining about how Taylor Guitars fits into this. This is a pretty important slide, very interesting. Some information on here that I did not even know, me being a part of the Los Angeles Orange County Urban Forestry Council. But the California Urban Forestry Council was founded in 1968 and is the oldest urban forest council in the nation. That's a pretty big deal, especially considering how strong and for how long a lot of places back east, like Pennsylvania and the Carolinas, they've been around obviously longer. Well, they've been populated a lot longer than us on the West Coast, and have been a big part of trees. But to know that the California Urban Forestry Council is the oldest in the nation is pretty incredible. This council is made up of professionals associated with municipalities, public works, urban planning and design, arboriculture, nurseries, community-based and public health organizations. I believe there's a couple more components of that, but those are the main players. They support 7 regional councils across California and have large investment in ground up programs. Partners. This part we're going to kind of skim through. Every one of these partners is important, and we could talk all day about each and every one of them. West Coast Arborists, a great company. They kind of brought this to the table. They are currently a contractor for us, but they are also involved in giving back a lot to the communities that they work in. Pretty neat company with a lot of components plugged into environmental studies, environmental feedback, and just doing the best for the state of California, Southern California especially. Well, both Northern and Southern California. Also a partner is the Western Chapter International Society of Arboriculture. The International Society of Arboriculture, for those of you who don't know, I know most people on here do know, but this is what certifies us as arborists and tree workers, municipal arborists, hazard utility clearance arborists, and we are part of what's called the Western Chapter ISA. The ISA is international. We have a lot of partners in other countries, Mexico, places across the pond, Canada, and we all work together. Australia has 2 big chapters. Founded in 1934, member-driven organization dedicated to foresting, a greater appreciation of trees. And for the Western Chapter, we have Arizona, California, Hawaii, and Nevada as our 4 states. The United States is broken down into a number of chapters, and I'm proud to be part of the Western Chapter. Funders, CALFire, huge player in this. They run the whole Tree City USA thing and help us monitor our Arbor Days. They are a big part of it. For our local council here, we have Abigail Schrader, who's very supportive and has always been a big part of all of our community gatherings for trees. And then California Climate Investments. Again, here's another. These are all agencies that have been involved in this. And I mentioned earlier that this is, we're trying to do over 2,000 trees in the state of California alone. But as you see, we've got a lot of communities that are doing exactly what we're doing here. And the day of our Arbor Day on March 12th, all of these communities will be planting trees. So pretty cool. Very honored to be part of this. Our entire community is, and me especially, pretty excited. Again, here's a partner community groups. The third one, of course, being the back one, please. The third one being the best, of course, with Rancho Cucamonga and Sustainable Claremont. Just to touch base real quick, I'll take this opportunity. Sustainable Claremont is our nonprofit that we partner with. There's many non-partners throughout Southern California. They're great organizations. Sustainable Claremont and City of Rancho have been doing partnering together for, I think this is going to be about our 5th big planting with the community. But it's just nice to use somebody who's local. They're the most local nonprofit to us, and being part of the Inland Empire, it's pretty neat working with them. So thank you, Nicole and Stewart, for that. 30 communities sharing the same goal, increasing the diversity and density of their urban forests. So a big part of this grant is what we call is diversity. And by diversity in the arboriculture world, we try to have as many different types of species as possible. And this is really important to build a sustainable urban forest for long periods of time. I mean, the reasons for that is, had we had all eucalyptus or all ash as our city trees, if there was a pest or disease to come through and affect those species, well, we would lose a big part, if not all, of our urban forest. When we have a big diversity of trees, a wide variety of species, that's a lot less likely to happen. Also, we're pretty blessed that Southern California here in the Inland Empire, we have one of the most diversified climates in the world. We have the tallest mountains here close by. We have the lowest places in the world close by. And here in Rancho, even, we have streets that have street trees, that we have trees that are indigenous to our desert climates, and we have trees that are indigenous to subtropical climates, and both thrive. Not all the time. There are species that don't do well here, but on the whole plant and tree palette, we are very blessed to have one of the most diversified, the capabilities of the most diversified urban forests in most of the world. When you get up to the Rocky Mountain chapter of the ISA, you only have a handful of species that are able to survive those harsh climates, where here, you know, it's rare that we get into the 20s for our lows, and it's rare that we're past 110 degrees for very many days, very many consecutive days. So again, this grant was kind of built around diversity and using what we call underutilized tree species. So we're going to be introducing a lot of species that haven't not been planted in Rancho Cucamonga as a community tree. There may be some of these species in people's yards and such, but on March 12th, when we do the planting, we will be using quite a few underutilized tree species, and to see how they do long term is going to be very exciting for those of us who are tree nerds, so to speak. Okay, so your local partners, again, there we are, Sustainable Claremont, City of Rancho. Again, excited to be such a part of this big planting statewide. Now, on this, what you're looking at is a countdown. I don't know how accurate this is, but there is the QR code, and that goes to catrees.org, and the live countdown is on that to our big planting day of, again, March 12th. Taylor Guitars, we're going to do a little, we're going to do YouTube video, but I just want to touch on this real quick. And the video is going to tell a lot more than this slide tells. But around the world, and especially around here, we interact a lot with municipal arborists that are local and in Southern California and Central California, but municipalities do struggle to maintain urban tree cover and cost effectively remove city trees at the ends of their lives. And that also goes for dangerous or for all different reasons. But traditionally, these trees are removed, chipped, mulched, or landfilled at taxpayer expense. West Coast Arborists and Taylor launched an urban wood campaign to make high quality guitars using instrument grade wood, species like chamel, ash, and more species actively planted. This is really cool. That's not going to go into it in video, but just me personally knowing a few of these things. Taylor Guitars goes all over the world looking for very exotic woods and different things to make these guitars out of. But for them to be making them out of our local woods, being a local company, is pretty neat and pretty exciting. These also act as carbon banks. And anyway, we're going to go to the next slide. It's going to be a short YouTube video. And please enjoy. Sit back and enjoy. Thank you, Nicole. The sound on, Nicole?
Give me 1 second. I am hearing it. Okay, can you not hear it? Lucas.
Excuse
Nicole,
me?
we can't hear it. I think you do have to share your sound on either Zoom or something else, but there's a specific little check mark for sound.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Found it. Okay, let's start over.
And also, Nicole, can you optimize the screen?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I have to do this
Yeah,
first.
for sure.
Can somebody give me a yes, whether you can hear that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're at the Big Tree in Glendora. This is a great example of the right tree in the right place. It was planted in, I think, 1880, so it's like 150 years old. And we're here because I have an environmental protest project, which I've been working on for a while now, which comes out next year, be at the London Design Biennale. And it's basically a way of presenting 800,000 years of historic data, specifically CO2 in the atmosphere, as a sort of woven timeline and a protest song and a reimagining of the music video format. So that's sort of why we're at this big tree. John, where are we?
Right now we are at a urban wood recycling facility for West Coast Arborists in California.
Nice. So you've got sycamore, redwood,
Sequoia sempervirens. Above that, deodar cedar. We've got ficus right here, more redwood. the state tree.
And some chamalash over there.
And some chamalash over there.
So you were saying there's what, like 30 species?
Yeah, the average city in California has about 150 species that are regularly planted. With certain cities like San Luis Obispo or San Diego, they have over 900 different species. So we've found about 45 or 50 species that are, generally around, that have a high-end use and that are worth capturing, and they're more valuable as a wood product instead of as firewood or mulch. They say about half the weight of dry wood is pure carbon. So, like, let's say, for example, this weighs 2,000 pounds. There's 1,000 pounds of carbon being stored inside the wood, So if you make firewood, it all goes back up into the air. If you make a wood product, almost works like a carbon bank, right? The tree grows, absorbs the carbon, then it gets stored. This is the best looking Swiss bank I've ever seen.
I totally agree.
We take this out here, we make a little tree well, pop this baby out, plant it in the ground, and 60 years later, maybe even more, you have a guitar to play.
We planted the tree over there just because it felt like a good spot based on not being near any power lines and not being around any other big trees, but also, as you can see, it's kind of a place that could do with some shelter from the sun and just another tree in general. So yeah. So we're here in Koreatown and I'm standing under a deodar cedar, and I feel like, particularly for a day like this is the perfect tree to find. Amazing shade, amazing species, and I feel like this school is going to be super happy to have a tree like this. So it's pretty amazing. There are so many trees hidden in plain sight in the streets of LA that we often don't think about sort of stopping and celebrating.
They figured out that chamalash was, the most similar to the mahogany of 20 to 30 years ago. It's prolific down here in Southern California, and so it just was like a magical thing that happened, and they realized that, there is a higher end use for this chamalash that was once going in the green waste stream. Pretty special.
Meeting Bob Taylor and learning more about the ethos and just how much, he's been a big part and very instrumental in sort of seeing, just seeing the landscape differently and really supporting, forests and planting of trees, but also the right kind of planting of trees. And then also thinking about how trees that would otherwise just be like discarded and thrown away can become a guitar like this, So sort of learning more about what they were doing in this area, particularly with this project From Green to Red, it just felt like a really wonderful fit of something I was already really passionate about and working on. And then, it was kind of a nice aside that the guitar I was playing on just happened to be one of these new examples of thinking differently about the urban landscape and sort of giving, value where it didn't used to exist. Mark your calendars for March 12th, 2022 as Amplifying the Urban Forests, hosted by the Californian Urban Forest Council in partnership with Taylor Guitars and the West Coast Arborists, will be empowering 30 cities that lack tree canopy coverage to plant 2,000 trees in one day. To see if your city will be participating in this and to learn more information, visit catrees.org and join us in celebrating these new trees being planted and their journey from seed to shade to song.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. So that was our little YouTube video, very informative. And again, that is where Taylor Guitars comes in to our our program here. And that's kind of where the name came from, of amplifying the urban forest. So thank you. While we're waiting to catch up here, the next couple slides we're going to try and go through a little quicker. Thank you, Nicole, perfect. Two of the people that are greatly responsible for this is Dr. Matt Ritter and Dr. Jen Yost. Jen Yost, I'm not very familiar with, but I have heard her speak before. Matt Ritter, I've been to many of his classes, and we've done a lot of outdoor workshops. I've attended a lot of outdoor workshops that he's hosted, and he's just such an amazing professor. Here's a little bit of information on both of these individuals. Matt was his San Luis Obispo Cal Poly is who grew a lot of the underutilized tree species that we're going to be using, along with Jen Yost. Why research matters. What are they doing? A lot of that is San Luis Obispo, and then Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and also some pending nurseries that are working under them and with them. What are they doing? Growing climate ready species. These species are more drought tolerant. In theory, they're more drought tolerant because of where they come from indigenously or where they're native to. So we're hoping to keep them that way. Able to capture more carbon, building resiliency for urban forests. Your participation in this grant will be part of their ongoing research for climate ready species. And we touched on that just a little bit ago. And what that means is, by planting some of these underutilized species, it's going to take a long time to get results and see how they do in the Inland Empire and in the areas they're planted. But it's pretty exciting to be a part of this study. The next slide shows some nursery stock. And I'm excited because I have 7 different species of oak that I am not aware of us ever trying in the city of Rancho. They're certainly not as city trees or street trees or park trees. So we have 7 new oaks that are going to be introduced to Red Hill Park on March 12th, along with a number of other trees. Describing an urban forest. They are trees in urban areas. These trees form the green infrastructure that communities need, from neighborhoods to metro areas and regional landscapes. There's some data in here. I don't know. It sounds hard to believe, but this is the data from years of study, that there are an estimated 5.5 billion trees, 39.5% tree canopy cover in US urban areas nationally that contain 127 million acres of leafed area. Big numbers. There's a lot of important factors for urban forests, a lot. And there's so many that we have 5 to 8 hour classes and workshops on and still don't cover everything. So right here on this slide, we're just going to break down the outline and of what the importance of urban forests are. Better community health. And there's going to be a slide coming up describing some of that health, but I'll tell you right now, from my experience and being part of different types of research, when we talk about community health, it's all different kinds of health, from emotional health, mental health, to physical health. There's so many things that trees in an urban forest setting bring to the communities. So again, better community health, better business productivity. Trees filter air and water. carbon sequester, which is a big word for taking all the particulate matter and all of the dirty air and helping filter it out into clean air. Controls stormwater, conserves energy, provide bird and wildlife habitat. Trees increase property values. They're definitely great for noise reduction and as well as erosion control. Again, still touching on the importance of urban forests. During 1 year, 100 trees can remove 53 tons of carbon dioxide, as well as pull 430 pounds of other pollutants from the air. Establishing 100 million mature trees around residences in the US would save an estimated $2 billion annually in reduced energy costs. Benefits and importance of the right tree in the right place. We've added one to that as arborists and urban foresters, and that's right reason. So benefits of important to right tree right in the right place is huge. We have so many, it's so hard to run an urban forestry program in an urban setting. There's a lot of poor planning from the past that was just because the research wasn't there. Proper practices were not applied in the past as much as I would like to believe that we do moving forward now. So in other words, there was just a lot of times that the wrong species was planted in a place where it wasn't realized it was a wrong species until 10 or 20 or 30 years later when the tree's matured and it's growing the way it's supposed to be growing, but the infrastructure is just so damaged that the tree can no longer exist there. It's a hard thing to deal with, but anyway, benefits of right tree, right place. Future growing space, its intended use, planting with a purpose, considering utilities and maintenance, energy savings, choosing species that will work well with the community's needs and there Here's something we're not going to go too far into, but there again, there is such a thing called the National Tree Benefit Calculator at treebenefits.com. And as a resident, as a homeowner, as an urban forester, you can go on this website and punch in, say, like this is an example of a 5-inch, meaning 5-inch diameter trunked silver dollar eucalyptus in your yard. And if you punch in and do all of the protocol for all the information it's asking for, will give you a tree, a benefit calendar, like how much of a benefit is that tree actually in my yard. There's a lot of different factors that it asks for, and obviously, depending on where the tree is in your yard, is gonna give you an estimate of what your tree's worth and what it's saving you annually. But again, benefits of urban forest: trees help promote physical activity, walking and other activities outside. Attention: after playing in natural settings, children are better able to concentrate. We know that when anybody from children or adults suffer from any type of depression or mental illness, that being around trees is helpful. And there's so many studies to show how much of a benefit that is. Asthma: trees filter airborne pollutants and can reduce conditions that cause asthma. Patients heal faster when exposed to views of trees and open spaces. Environmental: improved air quality. Trees, they remove and they trap dust, ash, pollen, and smoke. Shade reduces temperatures, helps keep pollutants from becoming volatile. Reduce urban heat island effects. There's a big term and a big words that would be, trafficy areas or parking lots where the sun's reflecting and beating down on the pavement or the asphalt. And when you have trees to break that up, it greatly reduces the urban heat island effects that it has on us as people. Cleaner water. Trees are natural filters. They slow stormwater. And there's that big word, carbon sequestering or sequestration. Trees capture carbon in the air. Thank you for bearing with me and my struggles with some of these big words. There's a lot of social benefits of urban trees. Trees encourage people to go out more, interact with each other, less violence and stress in areas with trees, provide privacy and a sense of security. Trees reduce noise in urban areas and provide aesthetic qualities, pretty flowers, greenery, beautiful fall colors. Ecological. Urbanization and development creates habitat loss for wildlife. That's kind of a big deal to me. I mean, we live here in the city and in urban settings, and it's so hard to see. We have a lot of coyotes running the streets. We've even had bears in our city. I know places like Glendora, Laverne, up towards the foothills have a lot of bear issues, and none of that's their fault. These are all species that us as humans have kind of pushed out of their natural habitat. So again, ecological, trees provide habitat for wildlife, natural corridors for birds and other animals who travel through urban areas, food, shelter for many. Wildlife controls pests, pollinate plants, distribute seeds, create more rich and diverse landscapes. This goes into tree basics. The only thing I'm really this can all be reviewed by individuals on, outside of this, but deciduous trees shed their leaves regularly. So trees that lose their leaves are called deciduous. Evergreen, they do not lose their leaves. We also have a lot of species that, species that are from the mountains of China that are deciduous. Here in California, in between that, we have what's called semi-deciduous. So it never really gets that cold, so only to partially lose their leaves. And in an urban forest, actually all over, but especially in an urban setting, roots are typically found in the top 3 feet. I would say realistically, probably in the top 28 to 30 inches of soil is where most of the roots, even of the biggest trees in the city, are found. We have anatomies of a tree. Pretty amazing specimens. What makes up the anatomy and what they do for the environment, whether us as people are here or not. Tree basics, tree variations, subspecies, usually geographically isolated from other members of its own species, and it takes on their own characteristics, in other words, able to adapt. Cultivars, variety of cultivated from humans, not found in the wild, often cloned. We use cultivar trees for everything. We use it for food. We use them for aesthetic values, for ornamental trees. We do this we as humans do this, say we have certain kinds of trees that have a history of being susceptible to root funguses and root rots, and we graft these to trees that aren't, so that there's a hybrid or a cultivar. Variety, a naturally occurring variation of a plant within its species. Form, a group with noticeable physical deviation. And we're going to go through all these. There's a couple slides with forms and some more words that we'll go through. Endemic is native and restricted to a certain place, found nowhere else in the world. I had mentioned how diverse we are here in Southern California. I mean, there's very few endemic I shouldn't say very few. There's not a lot of endemic species throughout the world, but there is. There is some, like even here in California, we have what's called bristlecone pines. They grow only in central northern California. They grow I think that I've seen them as far south as here in Mount Baldy, close to here would be bristlecone pines. But they don't grow throughout the world. They're the oldest trees that are living in the world. We also have our native redwoods, the biggest trees in the world. And those don't seem to do very well. There's exceptions to every rule, but they don't seem to do very well in places outside of where they're native to. So they, like redwoods, are somewhat endemic species. Another big word, indigenous, occurring naturally in an area, but may also occur in other areas. Indigenous is a big word for native. Naturalized, have become established as part of the plant life of a region. And invasive, usually spreads quickly and can outcompete naturally occurring species. Tree species can be integrated into our landscape through a variety of methods. The next slide just shows tree forms, kind of their growth habits, and that's where our right tree, right place comes into play. Tree basics, there's a whole bunch of different mythology and slides for or information for this tree basics. There's going to be, again, exceptions to every rule, but if you're planning around your home, or if you are doing planning in a community, you really want to pay attention to the tree basics. And knowing trees, you just really try to use common sense on right tree, right place, and for the right reasons. Tree basic plantings, is this a video, or is that just look like that on the slide, Nicole?
Yeah, this should be a video too. Bear with me here. Also,
Okay.
if anybody knows the shortcut to make the presentation full screen again, I would appreciate that, because for some reason it has taken away the presenter button.
And the environment, and of course the location. The tools recommended to plant a tree are a spade shovel, gloves, sturdy shoes, burlap, a rake, mulch, staking supplies, and in some cases where it's really difficult digging, maybe even a pickaxe. After you have gathered all the necessary tools, the next step is to clear the work area of any tripping hazards. We don't want anybody to fall and get hurt. So let's make sure we get rid of all that potential hazardous stuff. And remember to call 811 before you dig. Now we are ready to start planting. If there is sod in the planting site, you got to remove that first. Then we're going to start to dig that hole. We want to dig it deep enough to place the root collar of the tree a little bit above the grade of the surrounding soil. What is a root collar? The root collar can be identified as the part of the trunk where the roots originate from that lower tree area. Next, you use your shovel to loosen the soil in an area that's at least 3 times the size of the root ball. The reason we do that is we want to allow for the roots to migrate into the native soil as quickly as possible. When soil is compacted, it's harder to do that. We're going to remove the tree from the container by gently rolling the tree on its side and pressing the sides of the container to loosen that soil. Loosening the soil will allow the water to reach the roots more easily and encourage rapid root growth and quick establishment. Next, place tree into the hole, ensuring that it's standing up straight. Make sure to keep that root flare 1 to 2 inches above the natural grade. We are now ready to do the backfilling process. So we're going to take all that soil that we dug out of the hole, we're going to start to backfill it around our new root ball to minimize the air pockets and limit the concentration of oxygen around the roots. Backfilling is complete when the soil is even with the landscape soil surrounding the hole. Next, we will use any excess soil to build a berm approximately 4 inches tall around the drip line of the tree to help water concentrate and be directed straight down to help get those roots established. If available at the time of planting, mulch is a great resource to help a tree grow and establish. Mulch helps protect the tree's roots from extreme temperatures, conserves soil moisture, prevents unwanted weeds and grasses from competing with the tree for water, and provides nutrients for those roots. Mulch can be applied 2 to 4 inches deep in a circle around the tree extending all the way to the drip line. When the tree is planted, it's critically important that it be staked properly. As you can see, the nursery stake has been removed and we are using a double staking system consisting of 2 lodge poles and a set of ties securing that tree in place. It is critically important that the tree is watered immediately at installation to help it get established. During the first year, your young tree will require 5 to 10 gallons of water per week based on weather. We hope you enjoy planting your tree. What is an average lifespan of an urban tree? 18 years, 28 years, 8 years, or 38 years? For more information, go to catrees.org.
Thank you, Nicole.
Okay, I'm
So,
gonna try something real quick to see
Okay.
if this function makes it go back to full screen. If it does, yay. If it doesn't, let's see. Okay. I'm doing something. Okay, I'm gonna just let you go and then I will see if I can just get it from here. Oh, it makes me start over again. I
Nice.
don't know why it does that. Okay, I'm just gonna let you talk and I will scroll to the correct.
okay. So great little video there. Very basic. Nothing was done wrong really there, but at the same time, when you get a room full of arborists together, there's never an agreement on anything. So there's a lot of things in the video that would make some arborists just cringe, and then other people would say that that's a great job. At the day of the planting, we're gonna have our own little powwow on tree planting. We're hoping to have a lot of volunteers. Nicole, who's presenting right now, she's done some demonstrations in the past that I've seen that are just fantastic. And then myself and my staff will be helping. And also on this is a Dr. Fred Roth, who he's probably going to be helping out as well. I hope so anyway, because he's a lot of fun to watch do presentations. Tree basics, key planting pointers. We're just going to go through that. We just watched a video on that. And again, we're going to be doing demonstrations with our small planting groups on the day of the event. So we'll kind of just go through that. Anybody who wants to look at those key planting pointers, it'll be online to be looked at, right? We're gonna, depending on the amount of volunteers we have, we will have mulch on site on the day of the plantings. Whether or not we get to doing them that day, I don't know. I'm hoping that we'll have enough volunteers to be doing all the trees and having everything planted. I mean, all the mulch done the same day. To summarize the tree basics, we'll go through this. You're gonna need proper tools and a safe workspace. The holes will be approximately 3 times wider than the tree container. We don't always do that. Optimally, that's an ongoing debate with a lot of nursery people, arborists, landscapers. There's so many variables that sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not. Root collar should be slightly above the existing ground, that's for sure. Water as soon as the tree is planted. Of course, every time we will have water on site and available to every tree that's being planted on our day of the event. We will be trying to use the mulch the same day, if not the following week. Myself and my staff will be taking care of that. And to keep the mulches 6 inches away from the trunk. All good stuff. We have post-planning care, that's something that's going to be all on my staff. And but for those of you who will be doing planning outside of our event day, like in your home or in other community events, please check the tree basics for post-care. Brings us to number 7, Arbor Day, volunteer sign-ins. Print your pre-registration in order to facilitate sign-in the day of the event. There's probably going to be quite a bit of people. Hopefully we're going to have handfuls of children to help guide. So please do your best to do your pre-registration for that. On here will be the QR code to, there's going to be a whole bunch of ways that you can get to pre-registration, and I'll let Nicole talk about that at the end. It's important that you all make sure they sign in for the tailored guitar raffle. So if you're signed in and you're registered for this grant, all the communities involved, if you participate in our Arbor Day, you will be in a raffle to win a Taylor guitar, which is pretty darn exciting. Tools, take your necessary tools. We will have some tools there. We'll have some shovels and stuff available. We are going to have all the materials provided, but if you can bring your own shovel, great. That would help a lot. And again, it's hard to predict how many participants we'll have there. And wear old shoes, of course, boots. Don't come with open-toed shoes. Don't show up in flip-flops if you're going to be planting trees. Arbor Day, win a Taylor guitar. We will be holding a drawing after planting day where a lucky, hardworking volunteer will win a Taylor guitar. Entry details to follow soon and how to qualify. All right, so here's a little map of Red Hill Park where the event will be held. We're going to be holding it. Red Hill Park's broken into thirds. We're going to be holding this event in the top 2/3 of the park, which will be the upper and the middle parking lot. There's parking on Vineyard available. We're doing our best. We're making sure that we don't have any sporting events going on that day. So the park should be pretty wide open. All the places that we're going to be planting these trees are going to be where there was trees intended to be at one time. The park was built back in the mid 80s. And we're going to be plugging trees into what we call vacant sites where there was once a tree. I myself am going to be working with another supervisor, Tony Casillas, who is in charge of this park in finding the key areas. And then here is a list of our underutilized tree species that we will be planting, as well as the common tree species that Tony and I have selected to be planted into this park. There's some trees on there and the common species like the silk oak, not a true oak. Don't get that confused with the Quercus species, but it's called the silk oak, and the chamois ash. And some of those oaks and the Chinese elm, huge trees once mature, trees that we would not normally be using as street trees. So being in a park setting, perfect place to plant some of these species. I know that some of us are really excited to be planting the koa tree, rose gum, Japanese blueberry. I've never even seen one live before, so that's really exciting. Kaffir plum is from the Middle East and is a really neat tree species. Park is a good place due to their root structures. And then there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 oaks that have never been planted as city trees in the past for underutilized tree species. Again, very excited to be using those underutilized species in the city. Arbor Day, tree delivery and staging. I'm going to have all the trees will be there prior to Arbor Day, and we'll try to have them set out in the areas in which they're going to go to. Volunteer check-in. Hopefully most people are pre-registered, as we talked about, and check-in is 8. We're going to have a welcome. We'll be doing introductions. We're going to have all of our city council, which is 4 members, have all confirmed that they will be there. Our mayor has not confirmed he may or may not be there. He's usually at all of our Arbor Days and gets down and dirty with everybody and gets in there and plants trees. He's a lot of fun. CALFire Abigail Strader will be joining us. We'll have an amplified representative. We'll have a representative from the Western Chapter ISA. And then volunteer coordination and briefing will be done by Stuart, Nicole, and myself. We are going to be having the tree planting demonstrations as mentioned, and then we'll be doing our planting. We have again some more information on Arbor Day. If you can bring your own tools, great. Then we have our CDC restrictions and such. It's going to be an outdoor event. I don't know the amount of people that are going to be there, so just be aware that that's one of the slides. How to have a successful event. These are all things that we're, and us as the volunteers putting it on, are going to be some protocol for us to be following. Okay. It's Arbor Day, skilled tree experts at every event for coaching and guidance. So we're going to be broken into groups on this event, and we're going to have somebody who's an industry member, whether it be a volunteer that's familiar with the industry or an actual arborist. Hopefully we'll have enough arborists to have an actual arborist with every planting group, and they'll be available for questions and input and stuff like that. Please contact the city if you see any trees struggling. That doesn't just go for Arbor Day, it goes for any city trees citywide. What's not on here is also we have what's called RC to Go, which is an app you can use, or you can go on the city website and join as a guest. It's a really neat app, but any tree issues really should be filtered through that, so that we just have everything on record. And again, that's called RC to Go. It's for anything, not just trees. It's abandoned cars, anything within the city that that you may see wrong or that may be a concern, and follow the protocol. It's super simple to use, and it's just it's a really really good tool. Resources. This is a pretty good one. These are our resources for this whole grant and this planting day. CALFire, of course, our California Urban Forestries Council, which we've touched on, U.S. Forest Service, Urban Tree Foundation, Natural Tree Benefit Calculator, which we touched on, Central for Urban Forest Research, UFEI Tree Selection Guide. That's Cal Poly, and it's a pretty cool thing to visit with your right tree, right place again. And there's some links that some hyperlinks that you can go through to see different kinds of trees, and if you want to do some really detailed research on trees, specific tree species. Excuse me. And then the Arbor Day Foundation at arborday.org. All of these can be reached through that QR code there on the right. All right. This brings us to our next phase. Ron, are you there available? And with us today, we have Ron Servin. He's a certified arborist from Laverne, and he is going to be doing a virtual nature walk. As we mentioned before, this was supposed to be a live deal, but since we're going cyber, Ron's gonna present to us his nature walk. Ron?
Yes, I am here. Appreciate that, Lucas. Appreciate being here. Just, you guys showing up, listening to just some great information on how we can be stewards of the environment. So my background is, I was the kid growing up that just loved being out in the yard, pulling weeds. Just, that part of my life that I really grew into, and found my passion in working for a public agency. So I was a public employee for the city of San Marino for 36 years. I was the city arborist for 20 of those years in the city of San Marino. So as many of you know, San Marino is a very well-known urban forest type city, as well as just large properties with amazing old statured trees. So just as I grew into my kind of existence and career there, I just found how trees were speaking to me. Trees were telling me what they were benefiting from, what they were not benefiting from, and just how I could really understand how, as another arborist told me, the trees are just like you and I, just with nothing to do and nowhere to go. They're telling us a story. They're educating us. So I would ask you, although we're looking at a screen that's hard to kind of see the trees and understand some of the points that I'll be bringing up, I would encourage you just to create an awareness around trees as you walk through your own town, your own street, your own backyard, and just start noticing things. The appreciation of the trees, what certain signs and symptoms might be really available to you to then make a decision on what action may be necessary to improve the health of the tree, to understand the structure of the tree, how to kind of benefit the tree in the long run. So as the tree becomes mature, it's something that's going to be sustainable. Oftentimes I equate the young tree pruning with raising a child. If we don't make those investments and understand the benefits of creating that structure early on in our children's lives, same as a tree, that tree as it grows may become an issue. Structural limbs that become too large that can't be removed at some point, that should have been removed when they were young. So just envision, as you're looking at the screen, looking at this beautiful park and walking through this in your mind, and maybe closing your eyes might be a benefit to you to just listen and learn and grow from. One important factor is when you're planting trees, and this is more about soil information, is just understanding the makeup of the soil. I know Fred Roth is here, and Dave Lanham, who was my professor at Mount SAC, always talked about BBs, baseballs, and basketballs. Having a mixture of those elements in the soil to create the optimum soil to grow plants, trees into. So when you're looking at your soil, you may have the optimum soil. You may have the perfect condition to plant that tree. Sometimes putting in soil amendments isn't necessary because the soil you have is very conducive to the tree that you're planting into the ground. So just consider that when you're making the decision to dig that hole to plant that tree, that you're understanding the makeup of the soil. Do you have a very clay soil, and understanding how even soil removal may be necessary in soil replacement. I live in Laverne, where it's a challenge to plant in my landscape. So I have to put in new soil that will allow it to assimilate to the native soil that's around it. So just think about those, again, the BBs, baseballs, and basketballs, and how you're creating that within the planting site. A little bit about photosynthesis, just understanding the process, just where the plants provide energy and get that from the sunlight, and just the conversion of the CO2 and water into energy, and that oxygen that becomes from that, just that we're breathing and we're bringing that into our own body. So again, as you're walking through this beautiful park and you're experiencing a tree from afar, or in your mind, or in your backyard, just know what this amazing plant, this amazing tree is doing for you. It's providing you so many benefits that sometimes we don't pay attention to. We just assume that it's just there for aesthetics, not thinking about just the minor and major things that it provides us. A little bit about species identification. There's a broad variety of types of leaves, thick leaves, thin leaves, and all the density of leaves really allows it for more of a protection mechanism from hot summer heat, the conditions that they're grown in, whether it's sun or full shade. So pay attention to just what leaves may be telling you. sometimes the leaves that we have on our trees maybe not conducive to the types of plants that we're planting below them. We have to think about how a deciduous tree or an evergreen tree, knowing that we maybe have grass or other plantings below it, we want to think about how we're creating light conditions for the plants that we're growing. So a tree obviously is the predominant part of our landscape usually, and then we have companion plantings that we may plant below that or adjacent to it. So the idea is to consider watering requirements, soil requirements, all these things that then create an ecosystem where all the plants in that little area of the property are working together. So you're not overwatering a plant that needs extra water, and then at the same time you're applying way too much water to an oak tree that's not of benefit and may actually become a problem for that oak tree. So putting plants together that are like in relations to the watering requirements is very important, as well as the sun requirements, things of that nature. So just start looking at things in your yard that maybe some adjustments might be necessary. I know Lucas talked a lot about species diversity, and I love the idea of just the research that's been going into creating and understanding the benefits of different trees, and that idea of not putting a monoculture of trees, just all of the same trees, which on certain streets is required because that's just kind of been what's happening over the years. Most opportunities come up when there's new developments where species diversity is extremely important. And I love the fact that Rancho's making that next step effort to diversify the urban forest, to really understand the short-term and long-term benefits of this diversity. So think about that in your own yard. I mean, how can you decide to plant trees and plant, again, the right tree in the right spot for the right purpose? You're going to benefit from this tree, hopefully, for a long period of time. So asking yourself the questions, what do I want from this tree? Is it something that I want to be able to at some point put a chair underneath and sit in the shade? Is it something that's shading, again, like an area of my property, my house that is very, very hot in the summer and I need to grow a tree? So you look at the placement of the trees in the park, and those decisions were made to accommodate many of those situations. You look at the shady areas under some of these trees near the playground, and just places where kids can play, but also parents can enjoy some shade and serenity in amongst a well thought out landscape plan that really works well. And I'm sure Lucas could say, hey, maybe this decision wasn't the right decision, but I think we all know, we try to make decisions that are based on our own awareness at the time. And I think the value that urban forestry has gone into is just broadening our awareness, not necessarily being judgmental of the mistakes that were made, but making new decisions and knowing that those new decisions are setting the tone for future generations. We look at the ficus trees planted in business districts that created huge issues for many, many communities. And at one point, that was the right decision to plant those trees because they were fast-growing trees that provided the benefits that those trees did. But again, the right place, right tree in the right spot, all of these uplifted sidewalks obviously create some problems. So, when you're looking at these, these neighboring communities and the efforts that were made to plant the trees as buffers, along residential areas, and how that transitional area where neighboring properties can equally enjoy that relationship with the trees that are in the park. The proper planting, a lot was discussed about that with Lucas. I think, again, there is a lot of opinions on the proper way to plant trees. Another point that wasn't really brought up, but I think is important, and you're probably not going to make nurseries that happy at times, is to pull that tree out of the container and look at the root system. Oftentimes we just put a tree in the ground and we don't look at the circling roots that are created as a result of trees that have been containers for a long period of time. You're spending money on planting a tree that's going to provide you long-term benefits. If you're not going to do it, maybe ask the nurseryman to pull that tree out of the container and look at it and see if that root system is completely engulfed in this container and it's a tree that you shouldn't pick. you shouldn't choose to put that in your park, in your property, because it's going to be a tree that's going to potentially have issues with the structural root system of that tree. So take a look at the roots. I mean, roots are a very important part of the tree. I mean, we focus oftentimes about everything above ground. It's equally important about what's below ground. So if you can look at, these planting locations, in this beautiful park on your property, and understand, before you plant that tree in the ground, look at the root ball, understand the benefits of selecting a tree that's going to benefit from that inspection. Irrigation techniques, is talked about in the video of that early watering to establish the tree, or to make sure those root balls are maintained, the moisture level is maintained. I think even before that, looking at the planting hole and checking, the moisture level around that area is important as well. Doing a test where you're filling up the hole with water, a bucket of water, and look at your drainage. I mean, if you plant a hole in a site that has no drainage, imagine these beautiful trees on this property here. If they didn't have good drainage, the oxygen loss and just this dense, situation below ground is going to suffocate the root systems. And those conditions can lead to soggy soils, which in these wind events that we've had, not that all these failures are a result of these excessively moist conditions, but if we don't have properly draining soils, a lot of these trees are susceptible to these catastrophic losses. And I think those things can be prevented, just having the right tree, right spot, right conditions, good drainage, all these things that go into an important consideration. Disease, declining trees. Disease is something that we all want to be aware of. Oftentimes we're contributing to that. Our irrigation practices, planting trees too close together, not looking at the long-term, what this tree will look like, not only from a canopy standpoint, but also from a root development standpoint. Are you planting trees too close to, a parking lot? Are you planting these trees too close to a walkway? Knowing that these trees will expand, the root systems will engulf this whole area. So just looking at how, when you're walking through the park, when you're walking through your own property, think about that long term. What is this tree going to be doing 30, 40, 50 years from now? I run into this all the time as a consulting arborist, property owners that are requesting to remove trees because they planted a tree that was cute and looked nice in the nursery, planted it right next to their house, and now it's uplifting the foundation of the house. So those are all preventable. Those are all good decisions that you can make now. Again, just to kind of summarize how I look at trees and try to understand trees, is trees are telling us something. Trees are bringing things to our attention. The stress that your tree may be showing you is a symptom or a sign that something is happening. And, we can learn that part from trees and bring that into our life. We have our own signs and symptoms of our own struggles and, where we're at in our own life. And if we can integrate our thought process into walking through this amazing Red Hill Park and noticing what about ourselves we can learn and grow from, then we can make decisions. We can be more aware. We can be proactive to educating others that we're walking alongside in this park to bring things to their attention. Whether it's the nature that these trees are supporting, whether it's the deciduous tree that maybe somebody thinks is a declining tree, and we can bring to their awareness that's not a declining tree. That's just a tree dropping its leaves because it's a deciduous tree. But in that same light, a tree that's stressed is going to drop its leaves to help support itself, knowing that it can't supply nutrients and energy to sustain life. So, two different scenarios, right? A tree that's biologically a deciduous tree that drops its leaves because that's just how it evolves and grows, versus a stressed tree that maybe has the experience of several excessive heat days in the summertime. And we had this a couple of years ago where trees that we never saw impacted by our hot summer heat here in the Southern California were burned. The foliage was burned. The trees dropped their leaves. So those are, again, just things to be aware of, as stewards of this urban forest, the trees on this planet. How can we start paying more attention to the subtle things that are happening, as well as the learning opportunities? Again, I think just this idea that we're so similar to trees in many different ways, and if we can understand how our own life can be reflective of these learnings, I think our opportunities to bring people into this part of their life, visiting these beautiful parks, being part of these planting opportunities, creating this volunteer attitude to really help each other, in a time where, as we all know, lots of challenges out there, but those are all external, right? All these challenges that we're facing are external. So what can we do as stewards of this urban forest, this whole movement of greening the environment that can really grow not only the landscapes that we love to enjoy, but ourselves? And I think that's such a huge point to understand, that we can grow together. One of my tagline for my business is know to grow and grow to know. So, as human beings, we can grow into this experience of how trees create value in our life. And we can also want to learn more. So Lucas, great job to you and your staff for partnering with all these wonderful organizations to really make this happen in your community. And I applaud just the efforts of everybody here to show up for yourself and to learn. Maybe if you could take away one learning point as a result of you being here, and you can share that with others, or you can integrate that into your own house, your own landscape, your own thought process, then they've done what they were destined to do here. So with that, I know we're kind of running near the end of time, so I think we're going to open it up to questions. So I'll head it back to Lucas for any follow-ups with him.
All right. Very, very good. Thank you, Ron, very much. Those are some good points. Thank you for bringing up the girdling root thing, which is something that we will definitely be addressing when we do our demonstrations the day of on March 12th. We're going to open up to questions now and comments, but before we do, one of the written comments was from Jennifer L. And she had a good question. And I have the same question she has. She says, why is it limited, our city trees limited to 8 years? And to answer that, I know that Deborah had put a website up for the average lifespan of an urban tree. I don't know how accurate that is, Jennifer, or where that study came from, but I do know that in an urban setting, many times our trees don't last as long as they would in a natural environment, more of a natural environment, due to all different kinds of factors. And I think that a lot of that may have to do with the whole right tree, right place thing. Not having the right tree in the right place causing damages is really going to shorten the lifespan and bring that average number down. So maybe the website that Deborah has put up there can help with some of those answers. All right, let's open it up.
I have a comment about that statistic, and I'm not sure if you're hearing me.
I am hearing you.
Okay.
Fred.
My understanding is that it includes trees in business districts, and they have very short lives. And so it is sort of weighted a little lower because of that.
Sure.
Another factor to consider is young trees are very prone to vandalism. It's a major threat. And even if you're planting a tree that doesn't need a stake, it's recommended, because it's more difficult to damage a tree, to vandalize a tree that's been staked. So those are reasons why the lifespan, the average lifespan is seems unusually low.
Good points, Fred. Thank you. Fred, you want to introduce yourself? to the
I'm
group?
Fred Roth. I taught for 3 decades at Cal Poly Pomona. I am certified certified arborist, and I consult throughout Southern California. And if I might take a little time from the questions, I have 5 points that I'd like to make. I'll try to do them quickly, but we'll see if maybe they need amplification. First of all, not every tree needs to be pruned. And people think that for a tree to be safe, it should be pruned. Unfortunately, that usually leads to topping. And I've been collecting business cards from people. Often they're stuck in my door and stuff. And the first thing on the list is topping and trimming. And I'm going, that's the first thing? Throw that card away. I consider topping to be an extreme form of tree abuse, and it's rarely needed. Occasionally, primarily because people don't plant the right tree under power lines, got to keep them away in order to prevent contacts with the lines. And the problem is topping is obvious. Good pruning is very difficult to see. In fact, the guideline I'd like to use is that when you're done pruning a tree, it should still look natural. And when it starts growing, it should grow naturally. But that's also invisible to most people, and all they see is trees that have been hacked. Okay, point 2. If you're thinking about purchasing trees, small nursery stock establishes and grows more quickly than large trees, large nursery stock. And one of the things I like to say is, and I'm not sure everybody agrees, but having buying a large tree means that the tree has been in the nursery long enough to be abused by the nursery people. And so, yeah, trees aren't always moved along fast enough from pot to pot, and you get a number of problems that can develop. Turf grass is the enemy of young trees. And it's been shown that if you keep at least a foot away from the tree, you'll prevent injuries by equipment that mows the lawn and so forth, or string trimmers, but it also will help the tree grow and establish. Keep the further you can, the better, but at least a foot away. So that would be like a 2-foot circle. One of the huge problems in the industry is that a great deal of nursery stock has disabled roots. And just recently, I counted 33 sites where a local city planted lophostomen, and that was about 4 years ago. Immediately, as I drove by, I could see that the trees were not very good nursery stock, that they had a very poor like a circling or bent root system. And today, there are only 2 of those trees still in existence. Most of them disappeared even before the last winds, but a few more were lost this year. So that's a huge waste of money, of time, resources. Encourage nurseries to grow good trees. And a simple thing to look for, if the nursery tells you the tree is ready for sale, pick it up by the trunk. If the tree springs out of the ground, look for a better tree, usually at a different nursery, because the problems that create that are systematic, and often every tree in their culture is going to have that problem. The importance of a shallow hole, it cannot be overstated. People think that we need to do a deep hole so the roots can go deep. As you've already heard, trees generally don't have deep roots. They're generally within the top 2 to 3 feet at the most. A few roots penetrating below. But the reason why it's very important to have a shallow root that's no deeper than the root ball is that if you dig a deeper hole and the tree settles into the hole, you'll now have natural soil over the root ball. Water will not penetrate from natural soil into the lighter soils of the root ball, and the tree, no matter how much you water, will suffer from drought. When you're done planting the tree, the root ball should be exposed to the air, because when you water it, you've literally got to pour the water into the root ball just as though it were still in the container. Trees do not get water from the backfill until they have roots in the backfill, and it takes literally weeks before they have sufficient roots to absorb water from the natural soil. Got to pour it into that root ball, and don't allow soil to cover the root ball. That's all that I prepared. So if there are other questions, I'll be glad to contribute to the answers.
Good. Well, thank you, Fred. Great points. Really good points right there.
We have a question from Michelle about the winds that we had, and if anybody could speak to how those issues impact how trees are planted, or if you have any tips for how residents should plant their trees considering the severe winds we have.
Okay, so with that, Michelle, first of all, man, those winds can be painful, especially on young trees. Believe me, we spent my staff and I spent 3 days just doing restaking on trees that have been planted within the last 3 years, street trees here in our community. A rule of thumb that we try to go by when we are planting, and they were showing the double staking method, we try to stake the trees, place the stakes perpendicular to the strongest winds, which here in Rancho and our surrounding communities would be the Santa Anas. Sometimes if there's no windbreak prior to the newly planted trees, say whether it be structure or other trees, and they get hit really hard directly, we'll even do a third stake that would be upwind. Another thing that I like to do that we practice here is we put our tree stakes on very loosely to try and get the trees to be independent as quickly as possible. It seems to work well with establishing strength and independence without being dependent on those stakes at an early age. Sometimes it doesn't always work due to, as Fred mentioned, nursery stock. Nursery stock is hard to come by. Good nursery stock is hard to come by. That's a very big important factor in all new tree planting, probably the most important, even more so than planting standards. But that's the best we can do with the wind. It's something that can't be avoided, and yeah, that's it. Next question.
Let's see, Janine asked, where are the trees coming from? I'm assuming she's talking about the trees we'll be planting on Arbor Day. I'm not sure if she wants to clarify that. And then I know Ron also had his hand up. I'm not sure if there was something he wanted to contribute and piggyback off of what Fred was saying.
On the where is the trees coming from? The trees are the underutilized tree species are grown under the watchful eye of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Whether they're doing it on campus or some of those species off campus or at satellite sites, I'm not exactly sure of. I know that some of the other more utilized species are going to come from the grant coordinator, West Coast Arborists. We've gotten trees from them before. I personally am going to be doing tree inspections at the nurseries to pick out our specific stock to try and make sure that we get the best that we can from that. Ron, is there something you wanted to piggyback on, either something that a question I answered or something that Fred had said? What do you got?
Yeah, I know you mentioned early on about just how arborists sometimes have differences of opinions, and I think Fred's points were spot on. I think it's so important for those early decisions, those early things to happen. The one thing I was going to discuss was 2 points. One, in our landscapes, oftentimes we don't recognize the tree that was planted too deep, but it's very easy to spot those trees. When you look at the base of a tree and you see no root flare at the base, that was a tree that was improperly planted, to Fred's point, not digging that deep hole, making sure it's planted, at that point. So you could now, and I can encourage people to walk out through those landscapes and notice those trees that have no root flare at the base. And those are trees that may, based on the species, be able to adapt to that. But there are sometimes the need to do root collar excavations to pull back that soil, and an improvement can happen as a result of taking those efforts to remove and get it back to the original soil level. So that was my point on that. And then the other thing was just wind load related to us large established trees. And this is probably a point where arborists, have some differences of opinions. But what I've noticed and have seen research on is when trees are laced out, and I think there's this misconception that we want our trees to look pretty. To Fred's point, a tree that's been pruned properly from day one, you should not notice a difference between before pruning and after pruning. So a much denser tree in wind situations, and I've noted this in large trees in San Marino when I used to manage those trees, is when wind load hits a more solid mass, the wind can actually go below the canopy, it can be pushed above the canopy, and then when the wind actually hits this larger mass, the whole energy distribution is much more uniform. So I've seen much less substantial tree loss as a result of maintaining trees in their normal growth habit in a denser tree. I mean, there are times where some thinning may be necessary, but not to the point where you're seeing sunlight through these canopies. So to the point about wind, just look at trees in wind events. When you see these trees that are moving uniformly, all this energy that's hitting this mass is much less impactful on a tree that is maintained properly and not over pruned versus the tree that's laced out and has this wind event through it, which yanks out these large scaffold limbs or uproots the entire tree. That being said, 100-mile-an-hour winds, 70 to 100-mile-an-hour winds, all bets are off. I mean, all trees have a susceptibility to being displaced in those wind events that are just unpredictable and unfortunately something we have to deal with at times. But there are those that can be prevented, and I think that's what I'm an advocate of.
And so I agree and with everything you said, that trees are not sales. They have strategies for defending themselves. And one of those is that when they come under wind load, the branches tend to deform and clasp around their trunks. And this reduces the profile internally. And they also tend to move what they call chaotically, which distributes the energy rather than a simple structure, which can move harmonically, like that famous bridge that fell decades ago. We've all seen that, I'm sure, the Galloping Gertie. So yeah, over pruning can cause more damage than people suspect, as well as being frequently very ugly.
Yep, agreed.
When you encounter trees that have no root flare, very often that's due to initially poor nursery stock. And so the roots that were caused to wrap around the edge of the pot it was grown in tend to strangle eventually and prevent the root flare from appearing. And so that's one of the major reasons for having trees that look like they go into the ground like a post. And those trees are going to fail in winds. And just, again, don't want to be bombastic. However, I have been a professor. I have been asked if I was depressed about all of the tree losses in the winds. And my answer to that is, I recognize that it's a natural force and it's going to happen. And so I accept it and try to learn from it as well. I've been out looking at a lot of trees. What really upsets me is the self-inflicted wound of bad pruning. That doesn't need to happen. Okay.
Thank you, both of you. All right, well, we've gone past our time, and man, what an honor to have you, Fred and Ron, with us, and all of you. I just really want to thank all of you for participating today, and I cannot wait to share more of this information with each other and be a part of this event that we have coming up on March 12th at Red Hill Park. It's very exciting. We'll be doing a lot of work to prepare for this and methodically thinking out these species and their placement. And again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Nicole, for hosting this and putting this on. And I hope you guys are everyone's able to access this. On one of our last slides here on this QR, there's a lot of information. There's every city and every community that's going to be participating is listed in there. On every one of those, there's a hyperlink to the things that we've touched on in this conversation, in this little class. And please go through that to answer any of your own questions and for any information you may need. So thank you everyone again. Thank you, Deborah, and everyone who joined. I hope you all have a good rest of your day and weekend.
All right, thanks everybody. If you have any questions about the Arbor Day event, as Lucas said, you can scan that QR code. If you don't know how that works, just pull up your phone camera, click on it on the, hold it up with your camera, focus on the QR code, and then it will take you to that website. If you have any questions after visiting the site, then you can send me an email, which is up there, thegreencrew@sustainableclaremont.org.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks you,
Nicole.
everybody.
Right.
Hope you learned.
Take care.
Yeah, I think if there's anyone else that has a question that wants to stay on for a couple minutes, we can answer them now as well.
I think we're good.
All right.
I mean, if nobody has a question, I have a personal question.
Okay, go for it.
I have a deodar that looks kind of like a toothpick. And I know that in my research after the last wind, and I know in my research it says there's maybe like a central dead area where it's not going to re-sprout. I wonder what sort of re-sprouting potential I have with my deodar. It was planted, it was an LA County fair tree that my uncle got in the 50s probably. And any chance that it's going to be sprouting back from that central area?
Ron, you want to do that one? I see you're still on.
I think Fred also has an answer ready.
Okay.
Looks like Fred has lots of knowledge, so you want to hear from him.
How large is the tree? Maggie?
It's really big. It's probably at least 50 to 60 feet.
And it doesn't have branches? I'm trying to
It does have branches, but probably it lost about 50% of the canopy. I'm in North Claremont and we got nailed a couple weeks ago. And and a main leader up the top. It had 2 leaders and it lost half of the main leader.
Okay, so yeah, that's a weak point that frequently occurs. It's a conifer, and conifers generally don't sprout new branches as readily as broadleaf trees. So I'm not sure what to expect of it. And now, when you say it looks like a toothpick, did it lose a lot of needles in the wind? Is that what you're mentioning?
A lot of the 50% of the canopy branches fell. It didn't lose needles. It lost branches, ranging from 10 inches down to, all the little guys, down to 1 inch. It just lost all of the branches. Then the branches that are still there are fully needled.
Okay.
It's just in defense. I think it just did its natural thing. It's well rooted, and it just shed about 50% of its canopy, including the branches that went with them, the little branches. So what we're left with is a lot of those branches that have that bark that doesn't appear to me like it will send new branches out.
It not as readily as I mentioned as a broadleaf tree, but I wouldn't give up on it.
Okay, that's my plan. That's my plan, is not to give up on it. So
yeah, and I think to Fred's point, I think sometimes we make the decision to manage a tree that once was a larger tree as a smaller tree, and I think that's sometimes acceptable.
And it's still just as tall. It's still just as tall. It's just about, it's just not quite as fat.
Right. So again, sometimes there's that if it's an important tree on the property and it's still overly, still healthy specimen, we've done that with other trees in Lacey Park where the decision was made to just manage that tree as long as it's got some structure left and it's not an eyesore and it's still healthy. As a smaller specimen, it can still serve a purpose, whether it be a focal point, whether it be other aspects that you're trying to maintain and keep on the property. So it's kind of that. And there might be a point where doing evaluation on those growing points that fractured, where decay could set in, where restoration pruning may be necessary to work on that.
Got it. All right. Well, there's still hope. There's still hope.
Yep.
Yeah, Fred, my grandmother was an. What's that?
Sorry, I was gonna say we're sending positive tree energy your way right now.
Please do. My grandma was an arborist. My grandfather was an arborist. And when he passed away in 65, my grandmother took over the tree service and everybody bet she was going to fail as a woman. And she kept the business for another 14 years. And Fred, I don't know if she crossed paths with you, but when you were talking about younger trees versus older trees and abuse in the nursery, I'm like, that's word for word, Grandma. I bet she heard that from you at some point in time. So I really enjoyed the day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for joining, Maggie. All right, I think we are all set to close the call. Like I said, if you have any additional questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Thank you, Fred, Ron, and Lucas for being here, sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you, Nicole. Everyone have a blessed day. All right.
Have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.